Hey, so I wanted to make a video comparing a couple different laptops here. So we have the Pixelbook, and then we have the Samsung ATIV Book 9 Plus. The reason why I'm comparing them, because they're very different laptops, is I actually wiped the Samsung ATIV Book 9 Plus, and I put on it, it's called CloudReady. It's a fork of Chromium OS, and I kind of wanted to compare the performance because I've been using the Samsung for about 7 or 8 months now. I fully wiped Windows off of it, and I've embraced Chrome OS, and that's why I bought the Pixelbook, because I figured, hey, a laptop built specifically for Chrome OS, and it's premium because this was a $1,560 dollar laptop, closer to $1,600 laptop after taxes on the right here when I purchased it about 3 years ago. And this is the lowest i5 model on the left. So I wanted to show a couple of things here. First of all, specs wise, so this is the i5, and this has 8 gigabytes of RAM and just the 128 gigabytes of solid state storage. And then on the right here, we have an i7. I wanted to get the highest model at the time. So it's an i7, but the major difference between these two is, so essentially Intel, it goes the I series, and there's M for mobile, and it's the lowest power. They have a couple other things in between that, and then they have the 7Y series, so that's what this is, and this is more for tablets. And then they have the U series, which is more meant for a little bit more performance. And the major difference here is this has a fan, this does not have a fan. This is more of a laptop processor, this is more of a laptop higher performance processor. The difference is i7, i5, this is 2 generations old, and this is current, well, actually technically current generation, but I know that the 8th series of Intels are out as well. So let's kind of just jump into it and show a few things here. First of all, I wanted to show up boot up speeds here. So these are both Chrome OS in a sense. So let's do 3, 2, 1, on, and we'll see how long. So the screen turns on immediately with this, but then that boots up with the Google logo, and we are in the login screen on the left already. And then this is going to take a little bit of time, as you can see here, CloudReady. So I figured I'll use this time to talk a little bit about build quality. So, and this video I'm thinking is for someone who's maybe using a decent performance Ultrabook with CloudReady on it, because they're used to Chrome OS versus Windows, and thinking, should I buy a Pixelbook? Well, I don't know, is it performant enough? And this is what I'm hoping to kind of solve with this video. So this is booting. Okay, now we're on there. So you saw how much of a major difference between that is. And then one of the things that I noticed too as well that I actually do like a lot, I don't know if this is just a normal Chrome feature. I'm assuming it probably is, or sorry, Chromebook feature. So if I shut this down and I close the lid, I actually noticed that whenever I'd open this up, it would always just boot up. So let's try this test of not touching anything. Okay, it moves it a little bit, but so you open up the lid even after powering off, and it boots you right up into there. So it's nice. So when your computer is shut down, even if you choose to shut it down, it boots right up and you're at the lock screen. Whereas this, at least manually, if I shut it down, I have to open up and I have to turn it on pretty consistently here. So I'm going to pause the video while I log into my account, and then we'll kind of jump into a little bit more here. So one thing I have noticed too is that when I boot up, you have the no internet connection here on the Samsung, and then it goes and it connects to it. I didn't actually film this part, but it immediately loaded it up on here. So it's just a little weird bug. It might be specific to this model, but I figured a quick thing to do is just jump into an Octane test, and I'll talk a little bit more. Let me actually compare brightness, and let's go to Google homepage really quick, and let's just look at a white screen so you can maybe get a sense of kind of the difference between brightnesses here. So we have this on maximum brightness, and I never know the shortcut key here for brightness. Okay, that would be sound. That's one of the annoyances here. Okay, brightness. Great. So these are both similar brightnesses here, so you can kind of get a sense. The Pixelbook is definitely a lot brighter than the Samsung in maximum brightness, but I'll compare the levels a little bit just so the video doesn't have major issues with autofocusing. So let's jump into the Octane test just to see what it does. And I know a lot of this is outdated. I don't know how else to test performance here, but let's just click run and let it run for a minute. So I don't know how important this is. Just kind of what I've seen a little bit is Surprisingly, the Samsung has been very performant. I have noticed that the fans have started spinning. That's a major difference. This does not have a fan. This does have a fan. And so I'm assuming when higher activity picks up, the spin starts going, and then you kind of have the overclock or the hyper mode or the boost mode that they call it. And it's definitely noticeable here. There's a lot of web apps that I've used where I feel that it is more performant on Samsung than it is the Pixelbook. Um, and I'm not entirely sure the reasoning for that. I think comparing some of the specs, I think these processors are very similar in terms of performance. But then you can see here with the Octane score, so we're getting 24,762, and we're getting a higher one on the Pixelbook here. So what's interesting is I did this test a little bit earlier, and this was very consistently getting about 17,000, so about almost 8,000 less than the Samsung, and it was a little bit worrisome and confusing. And then I turned on the camera to record, and I realized, okay, wait a minute now, this is actually more performant than this, and I ran it a few times. So I'm guessing that maybe the first time that it ran, or the first couple times that it ran, maybe this was a little bit warm, and maybe it downclocked itself a little bit, or maybe it wasn't pushing itself into boost or hyper mode, because the sitting the clock speed here I think is like 1.6 gigahertz here. I don't remember exactly what it is, but then it jumps up to 3.3 when it's actually kind of in boost mode. So you kind of get to see this here. And I wanted to just do a few different tests, and these are just rough ideas, day-to-day use, like what you're going to get. So my Gmail is pretty heavy here. I have a bunch of Chrome extensions and specifically Gmail extensions. So I'm going to click both of these. What's going to happen is it's going to load up, and then on the right-hand side, there's going to be a frame that pops out, and that's a CRM that I use. And that it's always takes the longest amount of time to load. So you kind of get a sense when it's done. So 3, 2, 1, Gmail. So Samsung seems to get that screen quicker, and it's going to slide out right here. So loading up some emails. Okay, the right sidebar came out, and they both seem to load about the exact same. So it's interesting because we got the screen quicker here, and they ended up just ending at the same time. So that's that little test there. Let's jump into Asana, because this is usually a pretty heavy app. Let's let those boot up for a second. So as you can see, it's pretty much identical, and there's definitely some web apps that are more performant than others. So let's do some scrolling here on the right. You can see that it's very fluid on Samsung. There's no choppiness. And let's do the same thing on the left. You can see that it's very fluid as well. So for something like Asana, which some of you may be using, you can kind of get a sense that it is fairly performant for a web app, and you'd expect it to be, because these are some pretty high performing laptops with some pretty decent specs, and this is kind of just a web app. But so you kind of get a sense of both of these. So let's just kind of minimize this, and one thing that I did want to show is jumping between profiles. So I have a second profile set up here, and actually I'm going to log into it. So I'm going to pause the video for a second and then log into the second profile, and I want to show you a couple differences as well. Okay, so I'm logged into the personal profile here. So now I'm logged into two profiles, my personal profile and then my work profile. This is something that I do very often. I like, maybe popping up Google Play Music here. I'll play some music, and then I use the shortcut key Control Alt and then the right bracket, and that switches over to your other persona, your other profile. So I'm very often working in here, and then I'll jump over really quick, make some tweaks. Maybe I'll do some YouTube videos or something, listen to some music, and then I'll jump over to work. So I'm always jumping back and forth. So something that you can kind of see with performance is this kind of fade in that happens between switching these two personas. So very similarly on here, you see that the icons kind of rearrange themselves. And something that I did notice though, so these icons, they kind of fade out and rearrange. It does feel like they are a little bit less, they're a little bit more choppy actually on the Pixelbook. So, and this becomes a lot more apparent when there's a lot of apps running. And one thing that maybe I can possibly show here to maybe show that, it really depends on how many things I have running and how many things are going on. So let's jump to the personal one here. And let's switch over. So it fades in. Let's open this up as well so we have Octane open as a background. So you can see as I'm switching between these two, I don't know if you can notice, but there's a little bit of a stutter that happens right now. And then let's do the same thing here on this one. And let's open this up so we have the same thing going. And it is smooth. There's that little choppiness that happens when you're switching the persona. So this fade in here. So it's this fade in right there. It gets like a little there. So I don't know if you can really see it, and I know it's a very minor thing, but these are things that I noticed, especially when trying to compare these two, because it only exemplifies itself more when there's a lot of things going on. So I kind of get the feeling from just personal use that this gets bogged down a little bit less than this, which is a little bit sad, but I guess it's partially understandable. This is a lower clocked processor, not by much, but the fact that it is the 7Y series and this is the U series, and then the downside is you have the clock on here that's spinning and it gets fairly warm. Whereas this does get warm over time, but it's a little bit more reasonable, and it's so thin and it does not need a fan, which is great. So there's a little bit of a trade-off here. It's one of those scenarios where I kind of expected a lot more performance here on this versus, CloudReady, because CloudReady, it's not, necessarily I don't want to say a genuine version of Chrome OS, but it's not Google's version of Chrome OS. It's a fork of Chromium OS. And I figured that Google's would be a little bit more optimized. And I figured, hardware, same 8 gigabytes of RAM. I figured that I would just this would be a lot more powerful for my use case. So there are little things here and there that maybe tweaked and improved over time, and maybe I'm sure software they can improve it. I don't know how much of this is hardware limitation, how much is software. This is running on the beta channel. It is Chrome version 62. This is on the CloudReady beta/stable channel, and that's just on 59. So this is actually 3 versions behind this. Some of the major differences here is you can run Android apps on the Pixelbook. You cannot run Android apps on CloudReady. One of the interesting things that I noticed, and I did hear that hopefully it will change in the future, but if you are logging into 2 personas, whatever the first persona that you logged into can run Android apps. So here we can see the Play Store, but then let's jump over to the other persona here, and let's also do the Play Store. Play Store doesn't show up here, but if I log out of both accounts and log into my personal one first, the Play Store will show up. So I guess whatever the primary account logged into, that's what you get, the Play Store and Android apps. Otherwise, it hides them. So there's no Android apps here. I actually have a few Android apps pinned down here, but since I logged into the work account first, here this has some Android apps that are installed and can be used. Another thing to notice is the assistant key. I have noticed that I actually did not set it up. I just wiped the device. So this is actually just a fresh, clean wipe device. This was not. I have not wiped this in 4 or 5 months, but I think it really shouldn't make too much of a difference. But one thing that I did notice that Assistant sometimes is a little bit buggy when I press the key. Sometimes it doesn't pop up. And I think a lot of this will be improved with software. There are some issues that have popped up here and there. I'm also on the beta channel, so it's expected. And let's jump over here, and if I click the Assistant key, oh, interesting. Assistant is only available for primary profiles. So you can't actually use Google Assistant on whatever the secondary account is. A little bit strange, but it's the same thing for Android apps. So I'm hoping maybe in the future, I figure like why should it really matter? Why not be able to use the Assistant regardless of the profile you're in? But they want for you to be logged in order for that, whatever the primary login is. So overall, performance-wise, they're very similar. Aesthetics, I much prefer the Pixelbook. It's a gorgeous-looking device, and it's just very sleek, and it feels very solid. It's tough to explain. My mom actually has the Samsung Chromebook Pro, and it is a nice device, but it feels hollow. And the Pixelbook, it does not feel hollow at all. And there's little things that it has where, like, if I tap on the lid here, so I think it's 2 taps, then this little light shows off here. So if it's a solid white, then that means that your battery percentage is less than 75, but more than, I think, less than 75, more than 25. If it is a solid white and then it goes green, then that means that it is higher than 75%. It goes white, then green, then white again. And it's nice because you can, it's better when it's sitting on the table. It doesn't work as well when you're holding it, but you can see the little light showing up there. So the cool thing as well is like this is very well engineered because you can charge it here on this side with the USB-C cable and that, or the USB-C port, and then you can do this exact same thing over here on this side. And they duplicated this LED light, so regardless of the side that you have logged in, or plugged into, that it shows up. So it's great because, you know, when you plug in this cable here, so let's just plug it in to charge it, then you get to see when it's charging, it's just going to be white, and then if it's dying or if the battery is, you know, very low, it's going to be red, and then when it's finished charging, it is going to be a nice green color. So you could plug it in here and see, oh, hey, it's white, or hey, it's green, and then you know to unplug it, and it doesn't matter if you're on this side or this side, which that's just something that I love, and you can tell like the engineering that goes into that it's like regardless of the side that you plug it into, well, you're going to have that nice light there. And in terms of, I guess, use case, I could talk a little bit about tent mode and all that other stuff. I use it in this mode probably the most, just the normal laptop mode. Occasionally, I will be like this when I'm watching a movie. So if I'm watching Netflix or something, I'll throw it in this mode and I'll watch it. And then it is kind of nice. I think this is like the kiosk mode, as they say. So if it's sitting on your lap and you're using it as more of a touch screen, then it's kind of nice to do it kind of through this way. And then the last one, of course, is the tablet mode. Surprisingly, I haven't used it in tablet mode too much. I really haven't. And I also don't play like Android games or anything like that. But it's one of those scenarios where I'll probably use it like this more than anything. And this is my, you know, quote unquote tablet mode in a sense. So when you are in Android apps, it makes them full screen. So for instance, let's do an example here. And let's just open up Chrome. So we have Chrome open here, and let's throw it to the right-hand side here. So what happens is when it hits a certain point, it flips and it puts it essentially into full screen mode because you're not able to currently run apps side by side in this mode or in tablet mode. So now you just have the X and the minimize button. You no longer have the button here to let you change it. And there's a lot of cool things in Chrome OS that I love, and that's like, for instance, you can hold down on here and swipe left on it to bring it to the left side, swipe on it and go right for the right side. This is a little bit tough to do. There we go. So it is nice, and there's a lot of little things. I guess I've learned a lot of keyboard shortcuts, and I highly recommend because that's where the efficiency comes into Chrome OS. So for instance, you have your Alt. Alt is a very powerful key. So Alt right bracket will be right, left. The plus will make it full screen. Plus again will bring it back to kind of what it was before. You can dock it with the minus sign. You could dock it again to bring it back up. So these are all with Alt, and it's really quite powerful. And then I of course use the Control Alt right arrow, Control Alt, left bracket, and then the Control Shift minus sign actually changes the resolution on the fly. So you can change the resolution to be very large and then jump it down to be fairly small. So I do use this sometimes. If I'm using it far away, I'll just Control Shift and I'll plus it to make it a little bit bigger. And then I go back to kind of what my default is, Control Shift minus. So I do highly recommend learning some of these keyboard shortcuts because they are very efficient and it really is great. A couple other things that I want to show is let's just jump into a couple instances of, let's see, let's just do Google and that's another, and let's go to Bing. Let's give Microsoft some love here because we're on the Pixelbook. So one of the nice gestures that I use quite a bit as well is if you use 3 fingers and you swipe left to right on the keyboard, it will actually switch the tab that you're on. So if you have a bunch of tabs open and you're surfing through, you can just swipe like a quick swipe to the left, to the right, and jump either one tab over, or you can just do a quick slip all the way to the left and you'll jump over to that tab there. So there's all of these, you know, efficiencies kind of baked into these shortcuts. Swipe up, it shows all the windows that you have. And it really is great. And I think that's where Chrome OS really, I guess, shines, is when you learn the shortcut keys and all of the efficiencies within there, you can really fly on this. Whereas on Windows, you know, there's so many other things, and it's really not that efficient, even if you learn a lot of these shortcuts. And I guess I'm not as overwhelmed with the shortcuts on here, and a lot of them make sense as well. So, you know, Control Alt right arrow, and that brings you left and right over, or sorry, right bracket, that brings you between your personas. Like, it's very easy here. Whereas on Windows, it's kind of a complex, just to jump between different screens, and you can kind of, in a sense, have kind of personas going on there. But ultimately, on laptop, I am so much more a Chrome OS user than I am a Windows user. It kind of shows itself because I axed that on Samsung. I got rid of Microsoft there. So I definitely prefer Chrome OS here, and I like it too better, even in tablet mode and things like that, because Chrome OS, now that you can run a lot of Android apps, yes, some of them need improvements, and a lot of them are, you know, these small little these instances, or they're stretched very large, and it doesn't really make much sense. So they need to improve that, especially the aspect ratio. So maybe I'll open up an Android app right now, and it'll be very small. And then if I actually zoom in using the display setting here that I had showed before, so the, you know, Control Shift plus button, then great, it's usable. But when I have the resolution set down to 1800 by 1200, which the lowest resolution, or sorry, highest resolution is 2400 by 1600. But if I have it in this resolution here, well, the Android app is very small. And when I make it large, well, the text isn't bigger. It just uses more screen real estate. So really, to use some of these apps, you need to quickly, you know, scale it up a little bit. And okay, great, we got a larger screen here. So at the end of the day, it definitely needs improvement. I think it's great. The trackpad is beautiful. I can't even go back to this trackpad after using this. This is also a very, very good trackpad. I love it. It's one of my favorite ones. But this glass and the way that it's kind of built, and then these rests on the right-hand side, these are great as well, because it you know, it's a nice, versus just having on like the cold or hot texture of their surface of aluminum here. I much prefer this, and yes, these might get dirty. You can probably wash them off a little bit, but this just feels like a very nice, well-engineered piece of hardware. Assistant definitely needs improvements right now, and I'm going to be getting the Pixelbook Pen in a few days, and then I'm really going to kind of see how that works I want to take some notes during meetings and things like that, and kind of get a sense if it makes sense. So at the end of the day, I kind of wish I had the i7 16GB model. I'm not entirely sure if that's the bottleneck right here. Maybe it's just the 7Y series that is limiting, but you are giving up, you know, well, you don't have to have a fan because you have this. So it does have some benefits, and it's thin, and I'm still trying to get used to this. Hoping performance improves with software updates, because this is a little performant in day-to-day use. And I've been using this nonstop for 3-4 days, so I know it's not too long, but I can tell there are times where I have a lot running, and it really does get bogged down a bit. So I am a power user, though. The average person is probably fine with this, especially if a Samsung Chromebook Pro has been all right for you. That has 4 gigabytes of RAM. I'm pretty sure it has an M processor, and the Pro version M3 processor. So this will definitely be more performant, and at the end of the day, it's kind of up to you to decide, but I kind of want to show, here's a $1,600 model on the right, and here's a $1,000 model on the left. And yes, this is a couple years old, but they're very similar in performance at the end of the day. So I just don't know if that bump up to the i7 and 16 gigabytes would make this that much more performant, because clock speed is not that much different between the i5 and the i7. So hopefully this helps someone out. I would have liked to get a video like this before I purchased it, and I also know that I'm not the average user who has a nice Ultrabook and wiped Windows off of it to put CloudReady Chrome OS on. So there you go. All right, thanks. Bye.